The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of light and life. For 200 years, the High Republic has stood as a monument to peace, wisdom, and the Jedi Order's golden age. But what happens when something from beyond reality itself tears through the fabric of space, carrying with it powers that answer to no midi-chlorian, no Kyber crystal, and no ancient philosophy? Starlight Beacon hung in the void like a promise kept. The massive space station gleamed against the darkness of the outer rim, its corridors filled with the murmur of 1,000 species working in harmony. Jedi walked among Republic officials. Medical staff tended to travelers from distant systems, and the air hummed with the quiet confidence of an era that believed the worst was behind them. Master Avar Kriss stood in the central meditation chamber, her connection to the Force extending through the station like roots through soil. She sensed the rhythm of life aboard Starlight, the steady pulse of hope that had drawn so many to this remote beacon of civilization. Her fellow Jedi referred to her as the hero of Hetzel after she'd coordinated the rescue of an entire system from the Great Disaster. Here, in the Force, she heard what she called the song of the Force, the harmonious connection between all living things. The song shattered. A wrongness tore through the Force like a blade through silk. Avar's eyes snapped open as every Force sensitive aboard the station staggered. It wasn't the cold hunger of the dark side. It wasn't the chaotic violence of the Nihil raiders who had plagued the Outer Rim. This was something else entirely, a presence that felt simultaneously ancient and utterly foreign, as if reality itself had been forced open to admit something that should not exist in this dimension. Klaxons wailed. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors in crimson as Avar ran toward the source of the disturbance. Other Jedi converged from across the station. Master Stellan Gios, the methodical strategist, Elzer Mann, whose innovative approaches to the Force often troubled the Council, and young Padawan Bel Zettifar, still raw from recent loss but determined to serve. They found the breach in Bay 7. The cargo bay's blast doors had been blown inward, metal twisted into impossible spirals as if space itself had been wrung like wet cloth. Frost crept across every surface despite the station's environmental controls. In the center of the devastation, surrounded by a slowly dissipating mandala of golden light that rotated through geometric patterns no Republic technology could produce, knelt a man. He wore robes of deep blue and red, clasped with a brass amulet that seemed to drink in the emergency lighting. His face was sharp, aristocratic, with a precisely trimmed goatee threaded with gray. But it was his hands that drew the eye, scarred, trembling slightly, yet moving through precise gestures that left tracers of golden energy. In the air, around his neck hung a pendant containing what appeared to be a massive green gemstone, though the Force recoiled from it as if the object existed partially outside of reality. The man's eyes opened. They were gray, intelligent, and filled with the kind of exhaustion that came from seeing too much, knowing too much, and surviving when perhaps one shouldn't have. Fascinating, he said, his voice hoarse but controlled. Dimensional breach, spatial temporal displacement, and I'm still breathing. The odds against that were. He paused, studying the Jedi who had surrounded him with ignited lightsabers, blades of blue, green, and yellow humming in the frost-laden air. Approximately 3 million to 1. I should be scattered across several quantum realities right now. Identify yourself, Avar commanded, her lightsaber steady though the Force churned with confusion around this stranger. How did you breach Starlight Beacon? The man slowly rose to his feet, and despite his obvious disorientation, there was a precision to his movements that spoke of rigorous training. His hands wove through the air, and the golden mandala beneath him folded impossibly inward, collapsing into a point of light that vanished with a sound like a question mark. My name is Stephen Strange, he said, meeting Avar's eyes without fear. Dr. Stephen Strange, though the doctor part is complicated now. As for how I breached your station, I didn't. Something far more powerful than me decided I belonged here instead of being annihilated by a collision between the dark dimension and. He trailed off, his gaze distant. What is that? That energy field I'm sensing. It's everywhere. In you, in the station, in the very fabric of space here. It's like the astral plane, but alive, conscious, connected. You speak of the Force, Stellan said carefully, his analytical mind already cataloging every detail of this strange encounter. But you wield energies we do not recognize, powers that resist the Force itself. Strange's lips quirked in, something that might have been a smile under different circumstances. Where I come from, we call it magic. The mystic arts, the manipulation of dimensional energies, reality itself, through knowledge, discipline, and will. He flexed his scarred hands. Though I'm discovering that in this reality, my usual power sources are. He gestured, and a simple portal began to form, a spinning circle of golden sparks that sputtered and died after only a few rotations, significantly weakened. Interesting. Whatever brought me here severed my connection to the Vishanti, the dark dimension, and every other dimensional energy source I normally channel. Elzer stepped forward, his curiosity overcoming caution. Yet you still perform these spells without your power sources? Because magic isn't just about raw power. It's about understanding the fundamental architecture of reality. Strange's eyes unfocused slightly, and Avar felt him doing something with that strange energy of his, reaching out, testing, probing. And this Force you speak of, it has structure, rules. It's not so different from the dimensional energies I've manipulated for years. If I'm trapped here, I'll need to learn how to harmonize my abilities with this galaxy's dominant energy field, or I'll burn out my remaining power reserves in a matter of days. You speak of forces beyond the Jedi, Avar said slowly, of powers that do not draw from the living force, or the cosmic force. This is troubling. Troubling. Strange's gray eyes hardened. I just survived an interdimensional catastrophe that should have erased me from existence. Found myself stranded in a universe where the fundamental laws of magic don't apply. And you're troubled? Master Chris, was it? I spent years learning to see beyond the material world, to perceive the threads that bind reality together. If I'm here instead of scattered across the multiverse, there's a reason. The question is, will you help me understand this galaxy's rules? Or will we waste time debating whether my existence violates your philosophy? The Jedi exchanged glances. In that moment, Avar understood. They had encountered something unprecedented in the Order's long history, a being of immense power and knowledge, who operated outside every framework the Jedi understood. Not dark, not light, but something orthogonal to the Force itself. Take him to a holding cell, she decided. Comfortable, but secure. The Council must hear of this immediately. Strange didn't resist as Stellan and two other Jedi escorted him from the bay. But as he passed Avar, he paused. One more thing, he said quietly. When that rift opened and pulled me through, I saw something. A glimpse of futures and possibilities spreading out like fractals. Your High Republic is standing on the edge of a precipice. Master Chris, something dark is coming, not the dark side as you know it, but something that will test whether your golden age can survive contact with chaos itself. If I'm here, it's because the universe, or the Force, or whatever cosmic entity is orchestrating this, thinks I might be able to help, or at least bear witness to what comes next. He continued walking, leaving Avar standing in the frost-touched cargo bay. The song of the Force now carrying an unfamiliar harmony she couldn't quite place. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. 3 hours later, the Jedi Council convened via hologram from across the galaxy. Masters from Coruscant, Jedha, and a dozen other temple worlds appeared as flickering blue forms around the council chamber. Avar stood at the center, with Strange seated in a chair that was decidedly not a prison cell. The council had deemed outright imprisonment potentially unwise until they understood what they were dealing with. Strange sat with perfect posture, hands folded in his lap, scars visible in the chamber's soft lighting. Around his neck, that unsettling amulet continued to pulse with a light that seemed to exist at a frequency the eye couldn't quite process. You claim to come from another dimension entirely, said Master Adampo, a Kashurian whose analytical mind had spent decades studying the nature of the Force. Yet, our instruments detected no hyperspace signature, no ship, no conventional means of travel. only an energy burst that registered across spectrums we've never encountered. Because dimensional travel isn't hyperspace travel. Strange replied patiently. Hyperspace, from what I'm gathering from your discussion, appears to be a parallel dimension that allows faster than light travel within your universe. What I was attempting, and what went catastrophically wrong, was travel between universes entirely. Think of it as the difference between moving to another room in a house versus moving to a completely different house in a different city governed by different laws. And these powers you demonstrated, Master Kreve interjected. This magic, how does it differ from the Force? Strange considered the question carefully. The Force, as far as I can sense, is an energy field generated by living things. It pervades your galaxy, connects all life, and can be channeled by those sensitive to it. Correct? He waited for nods. The mystic arts operate on a different principle. We don't channel life energy, we manipulate the fundamental structure of reality itself. Space, time, matter, energy, dimensional boundaries. Where you might use the Force to sense the future or move objects. I would cast a spell that literally warps space-time, or peers into adjacent dimensions. Dangerous, muttered Master Rosasan. Such powers could corrupt, could lead to the dark side. Your dark side is an interesting concept, Strange said, and Avar noted a hint of academic interest in his tone. An emotional corruption that stems from fear, anger, and aggression. In my experience, power doesn't corrupt. Fear of losing power corrupts. I've wielded energies that could unmake reality itself, and remained, well, myself, though not without cost. He held up his trembling hands. These scars are from the accident that brought me to magic, a reminder that arrogance and carelessness extract their price. Yet you speak of darkness, Avar said. The dark dimension. You draw power from evil. I draw power from everywhere. Strange corrected. Light, dark, the spaces in between. The dark dimension is simply one source among many, vast, powerful, and yes, dangerous. But a tool is not inherently evil. Master Chris, it's how you wield it that matters. I've used the dark dimension's energy to save reality more than once. Always with the discipline to not let it consume me. The council erupted in debate. Some argued for Strange's immediate deportation from Republic space. Others saw an opportunity to learn about forces beyond their understanding. Elzer Mann, characteristically, was fascinated and pushed for cooperation. Stellan advocated for cautious observation. It was Master Nyla Quinn, an elderly Togruta known for her wisdom, who cut through the noise. The question is not whether we trust him, but whether we can afford to turn away someone who claims to understand forces we do not. The Nihil grow bolder. The great disaster still echoes across systems. And this stranger speaks of darkness coming. Perhaps the Force brought him here for a reason. The Force doesn't work that way, Master Adampo objected. It doesn't pluck beings from other realities and deposit them when convenient, doesn't it? Strange leaned forward slightly. I've spent years studying cosmic forces, Masters. The one thing I've learned is that the universe has a way of putting people where they need to be, when they need to be there. Coincidence is just causality we don't yet understand. I'm here. That's a fact. The question is whether you'll work with me to understand why, or waste time debating philosophy while whatever's coming. He paused, his expression darkening, while it continues to approach. You sense something, Avar said. It wasn't a question. Strange gray eyes met hers. When I arrived, my consciousness was scattered across multiple probability streams. I saw branching futures, the way I used to with the time stone. Most of them ended in fire and chaos. In all of them, starlight beacon falls. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Something is being set in motion, and your golden age. He shook his head. Golden ages never last, Master Chris. They're just the light before the storm. The council chamber fell silent. Finally, Master Nyla spoke. Then we watch, we learn, and we prepare. Dr. Strange will remain aboard Starlight Beacon under supervision. He will be permitted to study the Force under Master Elzer's guidance, and in turn, share his knowledge of these mystic arts. But make no mistake, her hologram fixed him with a stern gaze. We will be watching. One misstep toward darkness, and this arrangement ends. Strange inclined his head. Fair enough. Though I should warn you, if you're expecting me to fit neatly into your light versus dark paradigm, you're going to be disappointed. Reality is far more complex than that. Then perhaps, Elzer said with a slight smile, we'll all learn something new. As the council ended its session and the holograms winked out, Avar remained behind with Strange. Outside the viewport, the stars of the outer rim glittered with innocent beauty, unaware of the collision between two forms of power that had just occurred aboard. Starlight Beacon. You're afraid, Strange said quietly. Not of me. Of what I represent. You speak of magic, of bending reality, of darkness that isn't the dark side, Avar replied. The Jedi have spent millennia understanding the Force, building a philosophy around balance and harmony. And now you arrive, wielding powers that don't fit into any framework we know. Yes, Dr. Strange. I am afraid. Afraid of what happens when two incompatible forces meet in the same space. Strange stood, walking to the viewport. Then let me ease your mind with this. I've spent years learning that the universe is vast beyond imagining, and that there are powers far greater than me, greater than you, greater than either of our disciplines. If I'm here, if the cosmic forces that govern reality decided I belonged in this galaxy at this time, then maybe, just maybe, it's because your Force and my magic aren't incompatible after all. Maybe they're complementary. Two different languages describing the same fundamental truth. He turned to face her, and in his expression, Avar saw not arrogance, but the weary wisdom of someone who had looked into the abyss and returned changed. Help me understand your Force, Master Chris, and in return, I'll teach you that reality is far stranger and more wonderful than your order has ever imagined. In the cargo bay where Strange had arrived, frost still clung to the twisted metal, and if anyone had been watching closely, they would have noticed that the ice crystals formed patterns, geometric mandalas, that slowly rotated through configurations that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Something had followed Dr. Strange through the dimensional rift. Something patient, something waiting. The meditation chamber aboard Starlight Beacon had been designed to amplify force sensitivity. Crystalline resonators embedded in the walls caught and reflected the living force, creating an environment where even Padawans could sense the interconnected web of life with unusual clarity. Master Elzerman had chosen it specifically because he wanted to see how Dr. Strange's abilities interacted with concentrated force energy. What he hadn't expected was for Strange to immediately sense the architectural intention. Clever, Strange murmured, running his scarred fingers along the wall without touching it. His eyes were closed, but he moved with perfect confidence. You've created a sympathetic resonance chamber. The crystals amplify and reflect bioelectric fields, what you call the living force, back onto the occupants, creating a feedback loop that heightens sensitivity. He opened his eyes, gray and sharp. In my universe, we'd call this a sanctum, a place where the barriers between dimensions thin and magical energy concentrates naturally. Elzer exchanged a glance with Stellan, who stood by the door as both observer and guard. The methodical Jedi Master had insisted on being present for this first formal attempt to understand strange powers. Neither Jedi had ignited their lightsabers, but both wore them prominently at their belts. You can sense the Force's presence here? Elzer asked. I can sense something, Strange corrected, settling into a meditation posture that looked similar to Jedi practice, but with subtle differences. His hands formed precise mudras, finger positions that seemed to channel energy in specific patterns. It's like, imagine you've spent your life hearing music in a major key, and suddenly you're exposed to a completely different tonal system. I recognize it as organized energy, as something with structure and intention, but the harmonic frequencies are wrong. Or not wrong, just different from what I'm accustomed to. Show us, Stellan said. Not a request. Strange opened his eyes. Understand that without my normal power sources, I'm working with significantly reduced capacity. The Vishanti don't answer here. The dark dimension's energy doesn't flow through this reality. I'm essentially trying to cast spells with one hand tied behind my back. He flexed his scarred fingers. But let's see what happens when the mystic arts meet the Force directly. He began to weave his hands through the air. Golden light traced his movements, the same energy that had surrounded him upon arrival, but dimmer now, struggling. Elzer felt the Force around Strange twist and bend, resisting the intrusion of this foreign energy. It was like watching oil and water try to mix. Two fundamental forces that operated on incompatible principles. Then Strange did something unexpected. He stopped fighting. His breathing changed, becoming deeper, more rhythmic. The golden light of his magic dimmed further. But instead of pushing harder, Strange seemed to listen. His consciousness expanded outward, in a way that reminded Elzer of Avar's ability to sense the Force's song. But Strange's perception operated on a different frequency entirely. There, Strange whispered. I see it now. The Force isn't one thing, it's a spectrum. Life energy, yes, but also potential energy. Temporal echoes, spatial connections. It's everywhere and everything all at once. And it's… He paused, wonder creeping into his voice. It's aware, not conscious the way we are, but aware the way a river knows to flow downhill. Purpose without personality. The golden light of his magic began to pulse in rhythm with the Force itself. Not merging, not replacing, but finding harmonics. Where his power had resisted moments before, it now wove between the strands of the Force like a thread of a different color joining a tapestry. Elzer gasped. Through the Force, he could suddenly perceive Strange's magic, not as a foreign intrusion, but as a complementary frequency. It was as if someone had revealed an entirely new color that had always existed, but which no eye had been able to see. Fascinating, Strange continued, his voice distant. The Force connects life, but my magic connects dimensions. Two different planes of existence. Two different types of energy, but both operating on the fundamental principle that reality is interconnected. If I can learn to channel the Force as an anchor point, I might be able to restore some of my capabilities by using it as a substitute power source. Is that wise? Stellan asked sharply. The Force is not a tool to be exploited. Everything is a tool if you know how to use it. Strange's eyes snapped open, and the golden light collapsed inward, forming a small, rotating mandala in his palm. It held for 3 seconds before flickering out. But those 3 seconds were enough. Did you feel that? I just cast a basic Tau mandala using the Force instead of dimensional energy. It's inefficient. Like trying to run a combustion engine on vegetable oil, but it works. Elzer stepped closer, his scientific curiosity overwhelming his caution. The Force flowed through you, but it felt geometric, mathematical. When Jedi channel the Force, there's fluidity, emotion, connection. Your method felt analytical, precise. Because that's what magic is, Strange explained. The mandala reforming briefly before dissipating again. The mystic arts aren't about emotion or instinct. They're about understanding the fundamental mathematics of reality and manipulating them through will and knowledge. Spells are essentially algorithms written in gesture, incantation, and intent. The Force may be about connection and feeling, but at its foundation, it still operates on rules. Energy conservation, cause and effect, action and reaction. I'm simply approaching those rules from a different angle. An angle that concerns me greatly. Came a new voice. All 3 men turned. Master Avar Kriss stood in the doorway, and she was not alone. Behind her stood Master Nyla Quinn, the elderly Togruta council member who had advocated for Strange's cooperation. But there was a third figure, a tall, imposing Trandoshan Jedi named Master Skier, whose reputation for aggressive combat, techniques, and barely controlled temper made him one of the Order's more controversial members. Master Skier, Elzer said carefully, I wasn't aware you'd returned from the Kazlan system. The council recalled me. Skier hissed, his reptilian eyes fixed on Strange. They wanted a perspective from someone less enchanted by novelty. His clawed hand rested on his lightsaber hilt. I've studied the reports of your arrival, sorcerer. Energy that resists the Force. Powers drawn from dimensions of darkness. The ability to manipulate reality itself. Do you know what that sounds like to a Jedi who has faced the dark side's corruption? Strange stood slowly, meeting the Trandoshan's hostile gaze without flinching. It sounds like something you don't understand and therefore fear. A natural response, but not a productive one. You speak of fear as if it's irrational. Skier moved into the chamber, his presence imposing. But fear is often wisdom recognizing danger before conscious thought catches up. You wield powers outside the Force's balance. You draw from darkness without corruption, you claim. But I've seen what happens when beings believe themselves above the dark. Side's influence. Pride comes before the fall, Dr. Strange. Then perhaps, Strange replied. His voice calm but edged with steel. You should be more concerned with your own pride, Master Skier. I can sense the anger in you. It radiates like heat from a forge. You've touched the dark side yourself, haven't you? Probably told yourself it was necessary, that you maintained control, that the ends justified the means. The temperature in the chamber dropped. Skier's hand tightened on his lightsaber, and for a moment, Elzer thought the Trandoshan might actually ignite it. Enough, Avar said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had made her a legend. Master Skier, your concerns are noted. Dr. Strange, antagonizing a Jedi Master serves no purpose. Strange inclined his head slightly. Apologies. Where I come from, we're used to more direct confrontations. But Master Chris is right. We're not enemies, Master Skier. We're simply two individuals trying to understand a situation neither of us has encountered before. Are we? Skier didn't release his lightsaber. Because from where I stand, you're an unknown variable in a galaxy that's already teetering on the edge of chaos. The Nihil grow bolder every day. The great disaster's aftermath still destabilizes entire systems. And now we have a sorcerer who bends reality itself. Speaking of darkness approaching and futures written in fire, he leaned forward. Tell me, Strange, in those visions you claimed to see, did you witness your own role in this coming darkness? Or did you conveniently see yourself as the solution? The question hung in the air like a blade. Strange was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost its earlier confidence. You want honesty, Master Skier? Here it is, I don't know. When I was pulled through that dimensional rift, I saw thousands of branching timelines, each one a possibility cascading from this moment. In some, I help avert catastrophe. In others, my presence accelerates it. In still others, I'm irrelevant, a footnote in events far larger than myself. The one constant was that something is coming. And whether I'm here or not, it will test everything your High Republic believes about itself. He met Skier's eyes directly. I've made mistakes. Terrible ones. I once thought I could control time itself, and nearly destroyed my entire reality in the process. I've bargained with demons, walked through dimensions that would shatter lesser minds, and made choices that haunt me. But I'm still here, still fighting, because someone has to. If you want to hate me for being an outsider, fine. If you want to fear my powers, I understand. But don't question my commitment to protecting lives, because that's the only thing I've never wavered on. Skier studied him for a long, tense moment. Then, surprisingly, the Trandoshan released his lightsaber and stepped back. Perhaps you are what you claim, he admitted grudgingly. Or perhaps you're a threat we haven't recognized yet. Time will tell. But know this, sorcerer, I will be watching. And if I sense even a hint that your magic threatens the balance of the Force, I will act. Fair enough, Strange replied. Though you might want to define balance for me. Because from what I've observed so far, your order's philosophy has some interesting blind spots. Before Skier could respond, alarms shrieked through Starlight Beacon. The peaceful meditation chamber transformed instantly into a command center as holographic displays materialized from comm units. Avar's hand went to her lightsaber as a panicked voice crackled through the station's emergency frequency. This is the cargo hauler Steady Wing requesting immediate assistance. We're under attack by Nihil raiders in the Takodana system. They've disabled our hyperdrive and are boarding. The transmission dissolved into weapons fire and screaming. How many ships? Avar demanded, already moving toward the hangar. Sensors show 3 Nihil cloud ships and at least 24 strike fighters. Stellan reported, his tactical mind processing the data. The Steady Wing is carrying medical supplies destined for the Bith colony on Clackdoor 7. If the Nihil seize or destroy that cargo, thousands die from the lingering effects of the great disaster. Avar finished. We respond. Elzer, Skier with me. Stellan, coordinate with station security. What about him? Skier gestured toward Strange. Strange was already moving toward the door. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not, Avar said. You're not a Jedi, you're not trained in our methods. And we don't know if your powers will even function effectively in combat. I've fought extra-dimensional demons, alien invasions, and sorcerers who make your worst nightmares look quaint, Strange interrupted. I'm a surgeon. Master Chris, I have steady hands and the ability to make life or death decisions in seconds. If people are dying, I can help. The question is whether your pride will let me." Avar looked to Master Nyla, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation. The elderly Togruta considered, strange with eyes that had witnessed 2 centuries of Jedi history. "Let him go," she said finally. "If his powers are as formidable as he claims, we may need them. And if he proves treacherous—" She glanced at Skier. "We have safeguards in place." "You won't need safeguards," Strange said quietly. "But you might need magic." The hangar bay erupted with activity as Jedi scrambled to their starfighters, sleek vectors that combined speed with force-enhanced piloting. Strange found himself being ushered toward a small transport alongside Avar, Elzer, and Skier. The ship was fast, maneuverable, and armed with light weapons designed for rapid response rather than sustained combat. As they lifted off from Starlight Beacon, Strange pressed his scarred hands against the viewport, watching the stars streak past as they entered hyperspace. The sensation was unlike anything he'd experienced, not the dimensional folding he was accustomed to, but something that felt like falling through a tunnel of light while reality itself compressed around them. "Hyperspace," Elzer explained, noticing Strange's fascination. "We're traveling through a parallel dimension that allows faster than light transit. The Navicomputer plots safe routes through a higher dimensional space that folds 3-dimensional distance." Strange finished. "Fascinating. It's similar to the mirror dimension I can access, but naturally occurring and stable. Your galaxy has built an entire civilization on something my people would consider impossible, and yet you bend reality on a whim." Skier growled from the pilot's seat. "Perhaps our civilizations simply define impossible differently." The ship dropped out of hyperspace above Takodana, a lush green world dotted with forests and ancient ruins. But the beauty of the planet below was marred by the battle raging in orbit. The cargo hauler Steady Wing spun helplessly, atmosphere venting from a dozen hull breaches. Around it, 3 Nihil cloud ships, cobbled together. Vessels that looked like the offspring of a cargo hauler and a warship, disgorged strike fighters that swarmed like insects. "There," Avar pointed at one of the Nihil ships. "That's their command vessel. If we can disable it, the others might break off." But Strange was focused elsewhere. Through the viewport, he could see the Steady Wing's crew compartment, and his enhanced senses, honed through years of perceiving dimensional barriers, showed him something the others couldn't see. "The ship's structural integrity is failing," he said urgently. "In approximately 90 seconds, that hull breach near the engine section will propagate through the cargo bay. The decompression will kill everyone aboard. Then we board and evacuate," Elzer said, already calculating approach vectors. "There's not enough time," Strange replied. "By the time you dock and get your people out, they'll be dead." "Then what do you suggest?" Skier snarled. Strange closed his eyes, reaching deep into his training. The crimson bands of Sidorak, impossible. He didn't have enough power. The winds of Watum, too imprecise. But the shields of the Seraphim, if he could adapt them, if he could channel the Force as a substitute for the Seraphim's energy. "Get me closer," he said. "As close as you can to that hull breach." "What are you going to do?" Avar demanded. Strange opened his eyes, and they glowed with golden light. "I'm going to buy you time." The transport screamed through weapons fire. Skier's piloting aggressive and precise despite his earlier hostility. They came alongside the Steady Wing just as the hull breach began to catastrophically expand. Strange could see beings inside. Humans, Twi'leks, a Wookiee, all scrambling away from the breach as atmosphere howled into the void. He pressed his hands against the viewport and began to cast. The words came from a language older than civilizations, syllables that shaped reality through sound and will. But instead of drawing power from the Vishanti, Strange reached into the Force itself. He felt it resist. This wasn't how the Force was meant to be used. Not with this geometric precision, this mathematical certainty, but he pushed harder, forcing his will against the fundamental structure of the galaxy's dominant energy field. Golden light erupted from his hands, and suddenly the shields of the Seraphim materialized, not as they appeared in his home dimension, but adapted, transformed, woven from the Force itself into a geometric lattice of energy that sealed the Steady Wings. Hull breach like a bandage over a wound. Inside the ship, the screaming stopped. The atmosphere held. Crew members stared in shock at the golden mandala of light that had appeared from nowhere, holding back the void. Strange collapsed against the viewport, blood trickling from his nose. "The shield will hold for 10 minutes, he gasped. "Maybe 15 if I maintain concentration. Get those people out." Avar stared at him with something approaching awe. You sealed a hull breach with magic." "With the Force," Strange corrected weakly. "Poorly and inefficiently, but yes. Now move, Master Chris, before I lose consciousness and those people die." The Jedi sprang into action. Their transport docked with the steady wing, and within minutes, they had organized an evacuation. Strange remained at the viewport, hands trembling as he maintained the spell, sweat beading on his forehead. He could feel the Force flowing through his improvised shield, could sense the lives on the other side dependent on his concentration. This was why he had become a sorcerer. This moment, these people, the chance to stand between innocent lives and oblivion. But as the last evacuee cleared the doomed ship, as Strange finally let the shield collapse and darkness crowded his vision, he sensed something else. A presence watching the battle from one of the Nihil ships. A consciousness that radiated neither light nor dark, but something calculating and hungry. Someone had been watching his display of power very carefully. Someone who now knew exactly what Dr. Strange could do. Dr. Strange woke to the sensation of the Force washing over him like a tide. For a disorienting moment, he thought he was back in the Sanctum Sanctorum, surrounded by the familiar energies of Earth's mystical defenses. Then memory returned. The dimensional breach, Starlight Beacon, the desperate spell that had saved the Steady Wings crew, and he opened his eyes to find himself in the station's medical ward. Master Elzerman sat beside the bed, hands folded in meditation. His eyes opened as Strange stirred. "Welcome back," the Jedi said. "You've been unconscious for 6 hours." The medical droids reported significant neurological stress, blood vessel damage in your nasal cavity, and something they described as catastrophic energy depletion. They had no idea how to treat that last one. Strange sat up slowly, testing his body's responses. Everything ached with the particular exhaustion that came from channeling more power than one's physiology could safely handle. "How many did we save?" "All 43 crew members of the Steady Wing. Thanks to your shield. We evacuated them with minutes to spare." Elzer's expression grew serious. "But it cost you." The medical droid said if you'd maintained that spell for even another minute, you might have suffered permanent neurological damage. "Worth it." Strange flexed his scarred hands, feeling the tremors that now ran deeper than the physical damage from his accident. "Though I'll need to be more careful. The Force isn't designed to be channeled the way I'm using it. It's like forcing electricity through plumbing, functional, but inefficient and dangerous." "That's what I wanted to discuss." Elzer leaned forward, and Strange recognized the expression of a fellow scholar encountering a fascinating problem. "What you did out there, it shouldn't have been possible. The Force doesn't create geometric energy constructs. It flows, it connects, it moves through living beings. But you treated it like a building material, raw substance to be shaped and molded." "Because that's what all energy is," Strange replied. "The Force, mystical energy, electromagnetic radiation, at the most fundamental level. They're all expressions of the same universal constants. Mass, energy, space, time. The Force just happens to be this galaxy's dominant expression of that fundamental truth, shaped by the presence of midi-chlorians and the consciousness of living beings." He swung his legs off the bed, ignoring the protest from his muscles. "But here's what your order doesn't seem to understand. Master Elzer, the Force isn't special because it's unique. It's special because it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere, in everything, connecting all things. That's not a mystical truth, that's a physical one. Quantum entanglement, the observer effect, the fundamental interconnectedness of all energy and matter in the universe." "You're saying the Force is physics?" Elzer looked almost offended. "I'm saying the Force is the physics of your galaxy, shaped by the presence of life and consciousness. And if that's true, then it can be understood, studied, and manipulated using principles my order spent millennia developing." Strange stood, steadying himself against the bed. The Jedi approached the Force through meditation, emotion, and instinct. That's valid. But it's not the only way. Magic approaches reality through knowledge, geometry, and will. Two different languages describing the same fundamental architecture. And you believe you can merge them, Elzer said, understanding dawning in his eyes. You're trying to create a hybrid discipline, something that uses the Force as a power source but applies mystical techniques. Not trying, Master Elzer. Succeeding. That shield I created? That was the first step. Crude, inefficient, nearly killed me, but it worked. With time and practice, I can refine the technique. Learn to harmonize my magic with the Force, instead of fighting against it. Strange gray eyes gleamed, with the intensity of someone who had glimpsed a problem worth solving. Your order has studied the Force for thousands of years, but always from the same perspective, always through the lens of light and dark, Jedi and Sith. You've never had someone approach it from a completely orthogonal angle, someone who sees it not as a spiritual force to commune with, but as a universal constant to be understood and manipulated. That sounds dangerous, Elzer said quietly. The kind of arrogance that leads to the dark side, or the kind of innovation that saves lives, Strange countered. I didn't use the Force to dominate or destroy. I used it to protect. The intention matters. Master Elzer. That's something both our disciplines agree on. Before Elzer could respond, the medical ward's doors hissed open. Master Avar Kriss entered, her expression troubled. Behind her came someone Strange hadn't seen before, a striking woman with dark skin and an air of command that suggested high rank within the Republic's civilian government. Dr. Strange, Avar said formally. This is Senator Nor Ixuri of Takodana. She wished to speak with you. The senator stepped forward, studying Strange with intelligent eyes. Master Kriss tells me you saved 43 lives today using abilities the Jedi don't possess. On behalf of the Republic, I wanted to thank you personally. Just doing what needed to be done, Strange replied, sensing there was more to this visit than gratitude. Indeed. Senator Ixuri's smile didn't quite reach her eyes, which raises interesting questions about what exactly you are, Dr. Strange. The Jedi have been the Republic's guardians for millennia, their understanding of the Force unchallenged. And now we have someone who wields similar, or perhaps greater, power through completely different means. The Senate has questions. I'm sure they do, Strange said carefully. But I'm not here to challenge the Jedi Order or threaten the Republic. I'm simply trying to understand this galaxy and find a way home. And if you can't find a way home, the senator pressed, if you're trapped here permanently, what then? Do you become a Jedi? Do you operate independently? Do you? Senator Ixuri. Avar interrupted gently but firmly. Dr. Strange is a guest of the Jedi Order, under our protection and supervision. The Senate need not concern itself with his presence at this time. The senator's expression hardened. With respect, Master Kriss, the Senate absolutely needs to concern itself. The Nihil are ravaging. The Outer Rim. The great disasters. Aftermath still destabilizes entire systems. And now we have an individual of unknown origin wielding unprecedented powers appearing at the Republic's most advanced outpost. Surely you understand why this raises security concerns. What I understand, Avar said, her voice taking on an edge Strange hadn't heard before, is that the Senate is looking for weapons, tools to use against the Nihil and anyone else who threatens Republic interests. Dr. Strange is not a weapon, Senator. He is a person, and he will be treated as such. The tension in the room crystallized into something brittle. Strange could feel the political undercurrents, the Republic's fear, the Jedi's independence being questioned, the fragile balance of power being tested by his unexpected arrival. Perhaps, he interjected, we're all getting ahead of ourselves. Senator, I've been in your galaxy for less than 2 days. I barely understand how hyperspace works, let alone the complex political dynamics at play here. Give me time to learn, to adapt, and to prove that I'm not a threat. Then we can discuss what role, if any, I might play in your Republic's affairs. Senator Ixuri studied him for a long moment. Very well, Dr. Strange. But understand, time is a luxury we may not have. The Nihil's attacks grow bolder. Yesterday's raid on the Steady Wing was the 5th this week. They're targeting supply lines, medical convoys, civilian transports. It's as if they're testing our defenses, probing for weaknesses, or being directed by someone intelligent enough to coordinate strategy. Strange observed. Raiders don't usually show that level of tactical sophistication. No, They don't. Avar agreed, her brow furrowing. The Nihil have always been chaotic, driven by individual storm captains seeking profit and glory. But recently, there's been a change. More coordination, more purpose, which is why the Senate is considering more aggressive responses. Senator Ixery said, including accepting offers of assistance from unconventional sources. She departed shortly after, leaving Strange alone with Avar and Elzer. The moment the doors closed, Avar's diplomatic composure cracked. She wants to militarize you, the Jedi Master said bluntly. Turn your abilities into weapons for the Republic. I've seen this before, politicians looking at force sensitives and seeing tools rather than people. I've dealt with governments trying to control me before, Strange replied. SHIELD, the UN. Various mystical orders who thought they should dictate how I used my powers. They all learned the same lesson. I work with people, not for them. If the Senate thinks they can conscript me, they're in for disappointment. Good. Avar seemed to relax slightly. Because the Jedi Order values its independence for a reason. We serve the Republic, but we are not controlled by it. That distinction matters. Though it's a distinction under pressure, Elzer observed. The senator was right about one thing. The Nihil are escalating. If the Republic perceives the Jedi as unable or unwilling to stop them, politicians will look for alternatives, including trying to leverage someone like Dr. Strange. Strange moved to the medical ward's viewport, looking out at the stars beyond Starlight Beacon. Somewhere in this vast galaxy, forces were moving. The Nihil growing bolder, the Republic growing fearful, the Jedi caught in the middle. Their golden age threatened by chaos they couldn't fully comprehend. Tell me about the Nihil, he said. Everything. Not the official reports, the truth. What are you really facing? Avar and Elzer exchanged glances. Then Avar began to speak, and Strange listened with the focused attention of a surgeon studying a patient's symptoms. The Nihil had emerged from the lawless regions beyond Republic space, raiders who used something called paths through hyperspace, routes that allowed them to navigate impossible trajectories and appear where no ship should be able to reach. They were led by storms, captains who commanded cloud ships and small fleets. But recently, as Senator Ixery had noted, their attacks had become coordinated, purposeful. And their leader? Strange asked. We don't know, Elzer admitted. The Nihil are secretive about their hierarchy, but there are rumors of someone called the Eye, a strategist who sees opportunities where others see chaos. Strange's mind worked through the puzzle. Coordinated attacks, impossible hyperspace routes, a mysterious leader who remained hidden. It reminded him of countless enemies he'd faced, beings who operated from the shadows, manipulating events while remaining beyond reach. I need to study these paths, he said abruptly. If the Nihil are using unusual hyperspace routes, that suggests either advanced technology or knowledge of dimensional shortcuts your Republic doesn't possess. Either way, understanding how they move is key to stopping them. That would require access to Nihil technology, Avar said, or a captured path drive, which we don't have. Then we get one. Strange turned from the viewport, his expression set with determination. You said the Nihil are escalating their attacks. That means more opportunities to engage them, study them, learn how they operate. I can help with that, not as a weapon for your Senate, but as someone who understands dimensional mechanics better than anyone in this galaxy. You're suggesting we hunt the Nihil? Skier's voice came from the doorway. The Trandoshan Jedi entered, his reptilian features unreadable. Interesting. The pacifist sorcerer reveals an aggressive streak. I'm not a pacifist, Strange corrected. I'm a pragmatist. Evil exists. Sometimes you can reason with it. Sometimes you can't. The Nihil sound like the latter, raiders who prey on the weak for profit. In my experience, that kind of evil only responds to strength. A philosophy that edges dangerously close to the dark side, Skier observed. But there was a hint of approval in his tone. Though I cannot argue with the logic. The Nihil respect only power. Perhaps showing them power is the appropriate response. Master Skier, Avar said with a warning note. Master Chris, I understand your commitment to the Order's peaceful ideals. But the sorcerer has a point. We've been reactive, responding to Nihil attacks after they occur. Perhaps it's time to take proactive measures. Before Avar could respond, alarms shrieked through the medical ward. The same pattern as before, urgent, desperate, demanding immediate response. Strange felt his pulse quicken with the familiar sensation of crisis. A hologram materialized from Stellan's comm signal. The tactical Jedi's face was grim. "We have a situation." Long-range sensors detected a massive hyperspace disturbance in the Baranj sector, at least 20 Nihil ships converging on the mining colony of Sedri Minor. The colony's defenses are minimal, and they're requesting immediate assistance. 20 ships, Elzer breathed. "That's not a raid. That's an invasion." "Exactly," Stellan confirmed. "And it gets worse. Our intelligence indicates the lead ship matches the energy signature of what we believe is the Eye's personal vessel. The Nihil's leader is commanding this attack personally." Strange's mind raced. 20 ships. A mining colony. The mysterious Eye revealing themselves. This wasn't just an attack. It was a statement. A demonstration of power meant to terrify the Republic and challenge the Jedi's ability to protect innocent lives. How long until they reach the colony? Avar demanded. 90 minutes at their current speed. We can have a response force there in 45 if we leave immediately. But Stellan hesitated. "Master Chris, we'd be outnumbered at least 3-1. This could be a trap designed to draw us out and eliminate Jedi assets. Or it could be exactly what it appears to be," Strange interjected. "An attack on helpless civilians that we're obligated to stop regardless of the tactical situation." He looked at Avar. "You asked what role I might play in your galaxy's affairs. Here's your answer. Let me help. My magic, combined with your connection to the Force, might give us the edge we need." "You barely survived casting one shield spell," Avar protested. "Against 20 Nihil ships, the strain could kill you." "Then I'll die protecting innocent people," Strange replied simply. "I've died before, Master Chris, for far less worthy causes than this. The question isn't whether I'm willing to risk myself, it's whether you're willing to accept help from someone who doesn't fit neatly into your Order's philosophy." Avar looked at Elzer, then at Skier. The Trandoshan gave a slight nod, approval, or perhaps respect for Strange's willingness to face danger. "Very well," Avar decided. "Dr. Strange accompanies us to Sedri Minor. But you follow our lead. Use your powers only when directed. And if I sense you're pushing yourself too far, you withdraw." "Understood." "Perfectly." Strange moved toward the door, then paused. "Though I should mention one thing. When I cast that shield earlier, when I forced the Force to work with my magic instead of against it, I felt something. A resonance. Like two instruments finding harmony for the first time." He met Avar's eyes. "I think I'm beginning to understand how to truly merge the mystic arts with the Force. Not fighting against it, not simply using it as a battery, but creating something new. Something that combines the wisdom of your Order with the precision of mine. If we survive the next few hours, I'd like to explore that further." "If we survive," Elzer echoed. "That's rather a large if, Dr. Strange." Strange smiled grimly. "I've faced worse odds. Though I'll admit, interdimensional demons are generally less well-armed than Nihil raiders." As they rushed toward the hangar, Strange felt the Force swirling around the station like a storm gathering strength. Somewhere in the Barenj sector, innocent people were about to be attacked by forces of chaos and greed. And for the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Stephen Strange felt like he was exactly where he needed to be, doing what he'd always done best, standing between the helpless and oblivion. Though as their transport launched from Starlight Beacon and made the jump to hyperspace, Strange couldn't shake the feeling that this attack was meant for them, that the Eye, whoever they were, had been watching, waiting, learning, and that the real test was only just beginning. Sedri Minor burned. The mining colony sprawled across the asteroid's surface like a mechanical infection, hab domes, connected by pressurized tunnels, mining equipment that bit deep into mineral-rich rock, landing pads where ore haulers should have been loading cargo for transport to Republic foundries. Instead, those pads were cratered ruins, atmosphere venting from shattered domes, and fires that burned in the thin, oxygen-rich environment the miners had cultivated over decades. 20 Nihil cloud ships hung in orbit like predators circling wounded prey. Their design was anarchic, each vessel cobbled together from salvaged parts, painted in garish colors, bristling with weapons that had no business being mounted on civilian-class hulls. Strike fighters swarmed between them, and on the colony's surface, Marauders in mismatched armor dragged screaming civilians toward cargo shuttles. By the Force, Elzer whispered from the co-pilot's seat. They're taking slaves. Strange pressed his hands against the viewport, his enhanced perception cutting through the chaos to see individual moments of horror. A Radian child torn from their mother's arms. A human miner shot in the back while trying to flee. A Twi'lek engineer beaten unconscious and thrown into a cargo container. His hands trembled, but not from injury. From rage. How long until the rest of your forces arrive? He asked, his voice dangerously calm. 15 minutes, Stellan reported from the tactical station. We're the advanced scout, 3 Jedi vectors, and our transport. Against 20 capital ships and at least 100 strike fighters. The smart move would be to observe, gather intelligence, and withdraw until reinforcements arrive. And how many will die in those 15 minutes? Strange didn't look away from the colony. How many will be enslaved? Too many, Avar admitted, her hand tight on her lightsaber. But rushing in could get us all killed and help no one. Strange turned from the viewport, his gray eyes hard as durasteel. Then it's fortunate I specialize in impossible odds. Master Chris, I need you to trust me. Not because I've earned it, I know. I haven't. But because those people down there are out of time. And conventional Jedi tactics won't save them. What are you proposing? Skier growled, his predatory instincts clearly agreeing with Strange's assessment. A distraction. Something so unexpected, so threatening, that it forces the Nihil to redirect their attention from the colony to us. Strange began to pace, his mind working through calculations, spell matrices, and the strange new mathematics of the Force. The 3 vectors engaged there. Strike fighters, hit and run. Keep them occupied. The transport stays back, outside effective weapons range. And you? Avar asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. I board their command ship. Strange gestured, and golden light traced through the air, forming a 3-dimensional tactical display that would have impressed any Republic strategist. The image showed the Nihil fleet's formation, with one vessel at the center, larger, more heavily armed, and broadcasting encrypted command signals to the other ships. That's the Eye's ship, the Gaze Electric. If their leader is truly commanding this attack personally, they'll be aboard that vessel. I capture or kill them, and the rest of the fleet loses coordination. You can't be serious, Elzer protested. Board a Nihil command ship alone? That's suicide. Only if they can hit me. Strange's hands wove through the air, and suddenly he vanished. Completely. Not cloaked or hidden, simply absent from visible reality. His voice came from empty space. The mirror dimension. A parallel space that overlaps with your reality but remains separate. I can move through it, observe without being seen, and emerge at strategic moments. In my universe, it's one of my most useful abilities. He reappeared, looking slightly strained. Though maintaining it here drains me faster than I'd like. The Force doesn't have a natural mirror dimension equivalent, so I'm essentially creating a pocket dimension and sustaining it through pure will. But it'll work long enough to get me aboard the Gaze Electric and locate the Eye. This is insane, Stellan said flatly. Even if you reach their command ship, you'll be facing dozens, perhaps hundreds of Nihil. And we know nothing about the Eye's personal capabilities. They could be Force-sensitive, heavily armed, or both. Then I'll adapt. Strange met each Jedi's gaze in turn. I've fought Kaecilius and his zealots. I've bargained with Dormammu in the Dark Dimension. I've stood against Thanos with 5 Infinity Stones. The Nihil, whatever they are, whatever they've done, they're not the worst thing I've faced. And those people down there don't have 15 minutes. Avar was silent, and Strange could feel her wrestling with the decision. The Jedi philosophy emphasized patience, planning, working within the Force's guidance. What Strange proposed was aggressive, risky, and violated every tactical principle the Order had refined over millennia. But it might work. If you do this, Avar finally said, you do it our way. You locate the Eye, assess the situation, and signal us before engaging. No heroic sacrifices. No reckless confrontations. You're an observer first, combatant second. Strange considered arguing, then recognized the compromise for what it was. Avar granting permission while trying to keep him alive. Agreed. Though if the situation demands immediate action, then use your judgment. Avar ignited her lightsaber, the green blade humming with contained power. But remember, Doctor Strange, judgment forged in one galaxy doesn't always translate to another. The Force will guide you if you let it. Then let's hope the Force and I can find common ground, Strange replied, already beginning the complex hand gestures required to open a portal. Because we're out of time, the Jedi launched from the transport. In their vectors, sleek starfighters, that moved like extensions of their pilots' wills, guided by precognitive flashes. Through the Force, Skier flew with aggressive precision, his vectors screaming through the Nihil formation and scattering strike fighters. Elzer's approach was more creative, using the Force to predict flight paths and position himself perfectly for devastating attack runs. And Avar coordinated them both. Her connection to the Force's song, allowing her to sense the battles, rhythm, and anticipate threats before they materialized. The Nihil responded exactly as Strange had predicted, confused, angry, redirecting forces to deal with the Jedi incursion. It was the opening he needed. Strange's hands wove through the final gestures of the spell, and reality tore. Not the clean, stable portals he could create in his home dimension. This was rougher, sustained through brute force, and the unfamiliar energy of the Force. Golden light spiraled into a doorway that showed the interior of the Gaze Electric, specifically a deserted corridor near what his mystical senses identified as the command center. He stepped through and into chaos. The Nihil command ship was a marvel of anarchic engineering. Corridors twisted at odd angles. Gravity fluctuated between sections, and the walls were decorated with trophies from 1,000 raids, Republic flags, Jedi robes, species-specific, artifacts that suggested the Nihil didn't discriminate. In their victims, the air stank of ozone, unwashed bodies, and something sweet that Strange's medical training identified as recreational narcotics. He moved through the mirror dimension, reality's ghostly twin, seeing the ship and its crew but remaining invisible to them. Nihil raiders rushed past his position, arguing in a pidgin language that combined a dozen species dialects. They wore mismatched armor painted in chaotic patterns, wielded weapons ranging from crude blasters to what appeared to be repurposed mining equipment, and carried themselves with the swagger of predators who'd never met a challenge they couldn't overwhelm through numbers and violence. Strange followed the ship's command signals, his senses tracking the encrypted communications that flowed from the vessel's center like blood from a heart, through bulkheads and sealed doors, past guard posts and armories, deeper into the Gaze Electric's core. The command center was surprisingly sophisticated. Holographic displays showed the colony's surface, tracking the raid's progress with military precision. Tactical overlays indicated strike fighter positions, cargo shuttle capacities, an estimated value of captured slaves and materials. And at the center of it all, studying the displays with cold calculation, stood the Eye. Strange had expected a brute, a warlord drunk on power and violence. What he found was something far more dangerous. The Eye was Everini, humanoid, pale-skinned, with the distinctive cranial ridges of his species. He wore robes that suggested wealth and sophistication rather than a raider's armor. His face was young, but his eyes were ancient, calculating, burning with an intelligence that reminded Strange uncomfortably of some of his most dangerous enemies. This was no simple pirate. This was a strategist, a visionary, someone who saw chaos not as an end, but as a tool. Marchion Ro, one of the Nihil lieutenants, said, approaching with deference that bordered on fear. The Jedi have engaged our outer perimeter. 3 vectors, standard hit-and-run tactics. Marchion Ro, the Eye, didn't even glance up from his displays. Expected. The Jedi are predictable. They'll harass our forces, attempt to draw us away from the colony, then withdraw when their reinforcements arrive. Continue the loading operations. Prioritize skilled laborers and anyone with technical expertise. Leave the rest. Leave them, sir. The lieutenant sounded confused. Dead or alive, it doesn't matter. Ro's voice was cultured, almost gentle, which made his words more chilling. We're not here for a complete harvest. We're here to send a message. The High Republic cannot protect its people. The Jedi cannot save everyone. Chaos is coming, and no amount of force-wielding peacekeepers will stop it. Strange felt his blood run cold. This wasn't a raid. It was psychological warfare. a calculated demonstration meant to erode faith in the Republic and the Jedi Order. And if Ro succeeded, if he completed this operation and escaped, thousands more would die in future attacks. The decision crystallized in Strange's mind with surgical precision. He stepped out of the mirror dimension. Reality snapped back into place like a rubber band released. One moment the command center was secure. The next, Dr. Strange stood directly behind Marchion Ro, hands already weaving through the opening gestures of the crimson bands of Sidorak. Golden light erupted from his palms, not the pure crimson of Sidorak's energy, but a hybrid construct woven from the Force and his own willpower. The bands materialized as geometric constructs of solidified energy, wrapping around Ro with a speed that surprised even Strange. The eye of the Nihil was bound, immobilized, before he could even cry out. The command center exploded into chaos. Blasters fired from a dozen directions. Strange's left hand snapped up, the shield of the Seraphim materializing, again adapted, again drawing on the Force, again costing him more energy than it should. Blaster bolts splashed against the golden barrier like rain against a window. "Stand down," Strange commanded. His voice amplified through a minor spell of thunderous projection. "Your leader is captured. Order your forces to withdraw from the colony." Or, he never finished the threat. Marchion Ro was laughing. Not the manic laughter of someone unhinged, but genuine amusement. Despite being bound by energy constructs that should have rendered him helpless, the eye of the Nihil looked at Strange with something approaching delight. "Fascinating," Ro said, his cultured voice somehow cutting through the chaos. "You're the sorcerer, the one who appeared at Starlight Beacon 2 days ago. My sources said you wielded powers outside the Force, but I had to see for myself." His pale eyes studied, Strange with predatory intelligence. "Tell me, Dr. Strange, did you really think it would be this easy?" Strange felt it a second too late. The trap wasn't the command center. The trap was Ro himself. The Everini's robes contained technology. Strange's mystical senses hadn't detected some kind of energy. Disruptor keyed specifically to Force-based constructs. It activated with a pulse of electromagnetic energy that shredded Strange's improvised crimson bands like tissue paper. Ro was free, and Strange was alone, surrounded by 50 Nihil raiders. His energy reserves already dangerously depleted from maintaining spells with the Force's incompatible energy. "You walked right into my hands," Ro said, gesturing to his crew. "Stun him. The Senate will pay a fortune for a sorcerer, and the Jedi will tear themselves apart debating whether to rescue him. Either way, the galaxy learns that even beings of impossible power can be captured, controlled, broken." Strange's hands moved through defensive gestures, pulling energy from the Force even as his body screamed in protest. He needed a portal, needed to escape, needed. A voice echoed through the Force itself, clear as a bell. "Let go, Dr. Strange. Stop fighting. Listen." Avar, somehow projecting her consciousness across the void, her connection to the Force allowing her to speak directly into his mind. "You're treating the Force like a tool, like energy to be consumed. That's why it resists. That's why every spell drains you. The Force isn't meant to be taken. It's meant to flow through you." Stun blasts converged on his position. Strange raised his shield, but it flickered, weakening. His knees buckled. "Stop being a sorcerer for one moment. Stop trying to control everything. Trust the Force. Let it guide you." Strange's analytical mind rejected the idea. Control was everything. Discipline was the foundation of magic. Letting go meant chaos, meant faith. The kind of faith he'd rejected when he'd walked away from medicine. The kind of faith that didn't require understanding, only trust. In that moment, with stun blasts tearing through his shield and Marchion Ro's cold laughter filling his ears, Stephen Strange did something he'd rarely done since becoming a sorcerer. He surrendered control. The Force rushed into him like a flood breaching a dam. Not the reluctant trickle he'd been forcing through geometric spell matrices, but a torrent. It filled every cell, every nerve, every scarred pathway in his hands. And instead of imposing his will upon it, Strange let it guide his movements. His hands wove through gestures that were no longer purely camartage. They incorporated the fluid grace of Jedi combat forms, the rhythmic precision of Force meditation, and the geometric certainty of the mystic arts. 3 disciplines becoming one. Golden light exploded from his body, not a shield, not a weapon, but something new. A wave of force energy channeled through mystical technique. Guided by instinct rather than calculation, it swept through the command center like a tsunami, knocking raiders off their feet, shorting out weapons, and sending Marchion Ro stumbling backward. Strange rose to his feet, and he was no longer merely a sorcerer in a strange galaxy. He was something unprecedented, a master of the mystic, arts who had learned to dance with the Force instead of fighting against it. Impressive, Ro admitted, regaining his balance. But insufficient. The eye pulled a device from his robes, small, crystalline, pulsing with energy that made strange, mystical senses recoil. He'd seen similar signatures before, in artifacts that warped space-time, in objects that should not exist according to natural laws. Do you know what this is, sorcerer? Ro held up the device. A path engine. The technology that allows my Nihil to navigate hyperspace routes no Republic ship can follow. We can appear anywhere, anytime, through passages that shouldn't exist. His smile turned predatory, and when activated at close range, it creates a localized hyperspace rupture. Small, contained, but absolutely fatal to anything caught in the event horizon. He triggered the device. Reality screamed. Strange felt space-time tear open directly. In front of him, a wound in the fabric of existence that would pull him into the howling chaos of unshielded hyperspace exposure. Instant death, his molecules scattered across dimensional boundaries. His hands moved on instinct, channeling the Force through mystical geometry one more time. But instead of fighting the rupture, he did something his training had specifically warned against. He opened a portal into it. Two impossible spatial anomalies, the path engines, hyperspace rupture and strange dimensional portal, collided at the quantum level. For a microsecond, the command center existed in 3 different spatial dimensions simultaneously. Matter flickered between states. Time itself hiccuped. Then the anomalies collapsed into each other, canceling out in a burst of exotic particles and Cherenkov radiation. Strange fell to his knees, blood streaming from his nose, his vision blurring. He'd burned through his remaining energy reserves in a single desperate gambit. Around him, the command center systems sparked and died. The path engine reduced to molten slag in Ro's hand. The eye stared at the ruined device, then at Strange, with something approaching respect. You destroyed a path engine, he said quietly. Technology we've guarded for generations. Knowledge no outsider should possess. He gestured to his crew. Kill him. Through the viewport, Strange saw salvation arrive. The Jedi reinforcements dropped out of hyperspace, a dozen Republic cruisers and 2 score vectors. And leading the formation, her presence blazing through the Force like a supernova, was Master Avar Kriss. She spoke through the Force, and Strange heard her words despite the impossible distance. Hold on. We're coming. Ro saw it too. His expression shifted from triumph to calculation in an instant. Retreat, he ordered. All ships, execute emergency dispersal protocol. We leave now. But sir, the sorcerer is irrelevant. Ro turned toward the exit, pausing only to look back at Strange. You're skilled, Dr. Strange. Powerful. But you made a critical error today. You showed me exactly what you're capable of. Next time we meet, I'll be prepared. He vanished into the ship's interior as the gaze electric shuddered, its engines igniting for emergency jump. Strange tried to stand, tried to give chase, but his body refused to cooperate. He'd pushed too far, burned too bright. The command center door exploded inward in a shower of molten metal. Avar Kriss strode through, lightsaber igniting everything. Her presence a beacon of the light side. Behind her came Skier and Elzer, weapons ready, scanning for threats. Strange. Avar reached him as his vision began to tunnel. What did you do? The Force around you it's changed. It's singing in frequencies I've never heard. New. Harmony. Strange managed, tasting copper. Force and magic. Learning to dance. The gaze electric jumped to hyperspace, taking Marchion Ro and most of his fleet with it. But 5 Nihil ships remained, disabled by the Jedi assault, their crews surrendering in the face of overwhelming force. On Sedri Minor's surface, 217 colonists had been saved. 43 had died. 62 had been taken aboard ships that escaped. Victory and defeat mingled inextricably. as the Jedi carried Strange back to their transport. As his consciousness faded toward welcome darkness, he heard Avar's voice one final time. You saved them. Whatever the cost, you saved them. But Strange knew the truth. He hadn't saved everyone. 62 people were gone, likely enslaved or worse. Marchion Ro had escaped with valuable intelligence about Strange's capabilities, and the Path Engine's destruction meant they'd lost their best chance to understand how the Nihil moved through hyperspace. Tactical victory, strategic ambiguity, personal cost still being calculated. As darkness finally claimed him, Strange's last thought was wondering whether he'd played perfectly into Ro's hands, and whether the Eye of the Nihil had wanted him to destroy that Path Engine all along. Consciousness returned slowly, like swimming up through dark water toward distant light. Stephen Strange opened his eyes to find himself in Starlight Beacons medical ward for the second time in 3 days, which he suspected might be establishing an unfortunate pattern. This time, however, he wasn't alone. The Jedi Council had assembled in person, not as holograms, but physically present. Masters from across the galaxy who had traveled to the Outer Rim specifically to witness what Strange had become. Avar Kriss stood closest, her expression unreadable. Stellan Gios maintained his characteristic analytical distance. Elzerman looked fascinated and worried in equal measure. Skier lurked near the door, arms crossed, his reptilian features thoughtful rather than hostile, and seated at the center of the gathering, moving with the careful grace of great age, was a Jedi Strange hadn't seen before. A Wookiee whose fur had gone silver with centuries, whose presence in the Force felt ancient and vast as a mountain range. When he spoke, his voice was a deep rumble that the medical ward's translator rendered into basic. Master Briaga Agaburi. The Wookiee introduced himself. I have served the Jedi Order for 300 years, Dr. Strange. I have witnessed the rise and fall of Republic Chancellors, the discovery of new hyperspace routes, and the training of 7 generations of Padawans. In all that time, I have never sensed what you accomplished aboard the Gaze Electric. Strange sat up carefully, testing his body's responses. Everything ached, but the dangerous energy depletion had stabilized. I'm guessing standard. Force healing couldn't fix whatever I did to myself. Because you didn't just exhaust your physical reserves, Elzer said, stepping forward. You fundamentally altered how the Force flows through you. When we found you, your midichlorian count was fluctuating wildly, rising and falling in patterns our medical droids couldn't explain. It was as if your cells were learning to process the Force in real time, adapting to a new type of energy. The mystic arts and the Force, Strange said quietly. They merged. Not completely, not permanently, but for those few moments when I stopped fighting and let the Force guide my magic. Instead of controlling it, we became something new. Something neither Jedi nor sorcerer, but both. Master Briaga leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying Strange with an intensity that felt like being examined at the cellular level. Show us. It wasn't a request. Strange slid off the medical bed, steadying himself against a wave of vertigo. His hands trembled, the old injuries compounded by the new strain, but he forced them into position. Not the sharp, geometric gestures of Kamartaj, not the flowing, emotional movements of Jedi meditation. Something in between. Something that incorporated both disciplines' wisdom. He reached for his magic, for the dimensional energies that had sustained his spells since Kamartaj. They were distant, weakened, barely responding. Across the dimensional barriers that separated this galaxy from his home universe. Then he reached for the Force. It came to him like an old friend, no longer resisting, no longer fighting his attempts to channel it through mystical matrices. The Force flowed into his consciousness with a harmony that should have been impossible. Life energy and dimensional manipulation, learning to speak the same language. Golden light erupted from his hands, but it was different now, threaded through with green luminescence, shot through with patterns that resembled Jedi Force techniques, but moved according to mystical geometry. He shaped it into a simple construct, the Tau Mandala, but where before it had been purely golden, purely his magic, this version pulsed with life, with connection, with the living Force itself woven through every geometric line. The assembled Jedi gasped. Impossible, Stellan whispered. The Force doesn't form geometric constructs. It flows, it connects, it does what its user believes it can do. Strange interrupted gently, letting the mandala dissipate. Master Stellan, your order has spent millennia developing one philosophy for channeling the Force, light and dark, emotion and serenity, connection and detachment. Those frameworks work beautifully for your purposes, but they're not the only framework possible. He turned to address the entire council. The mystic arts operate on the principle that reality has fundamental architecture, mathematical, geometric, precise. For centuries, I assumed that was incompatible with the Force's fluid, emotional nature. But I was wrong. The Force has architecture too. Structure, rules. Your order has simply approached those rules from a perspective that emphasizes intuition over analysis, feeling over understanding. You speak of the Force as if it's a tool to be studied, Master Bryagas said, his translator rendering the Wookiees' tone as somewhere between concerned and intrigued. But the Force is alive, conscious in ways that transcend analytical understanding. I'm not denying its consciousness, Strange replied. I'm suggesting that consciousness and structure aren't mutually exclusive. A living being has architecture, bones, muscles, neural pathways. That doesn't make them any less alive. The Force has architecture too. Patterns, frequencies, harmonics that can be understood, predicted, and worked with instead of simply surrendered to. Dangerous thinking, Skier growled. The kind of arrogance that leads to the dark side? Yes, I know. Strange met the Trandoshan's eyes. Master Skier, I've heard that warning from 3 different Jedi in as many days. But consider this. I channeled immense power aboard the Gaze Electric. Power that would have corrupted someone using the dark side's philosophy of domination and control. Yet I feel no different. No hunger for more power, no desire to dominate, no fear of losing what I've gained. Why? Because my approach isn't about taking power. It's about understanding power. There's a difference. Is there? Avar asked quietly. She stepped forward, and Strange could see the conflict in her expression. You destroyed a path engine, Dr. Strange. Technology the Nihil have guarded for generations. And in doing so, you may have eliminated our best chance to understand how they navigate hyperspace so effectively. The accusation hung in the air. You think I made a mistake, Strange said. It wasn't a question. I think you made a choice without consulting anyone, without considering alternatives, without understanding the strategic implications. Avar's voice remained gentle, but the criticism was clear. That's not how Jedi operate. We work together. We trust the Force to guide us collectively, not individual judgment to dictate action. And if I'd taken time to consult, Marchion Ro would have activated that path engine and killed me. 62 colonists would still be enslaved. But at least you'd have the moral high ground. Strange heard the bitterness in his own voice and forced himself to moderate. Master Chris, I respect your philosophy. I do. But I'm a surgeon. I'm trained to make life or death decisions in seconds, often with incomplete information. When I saw that device, when I recognized it as both weapon and technology worth studying, I made a calculation, my life versus future intelligence. I chose to survive, a choice that may cost countless lives if we can't understand path technology, Stellan observed, or a choice that saved countless lives by denying the Nihil their leader's presence and forcing them to retreat. Strange's hands clenched. You don't know. I don't know. That's the nature of crisis decisions. You act with the information available and live with the consequences. Silence filled the medical ward. The council exchanged glances, communicating through the Force in ways Strange could sense but not interpret. Finally, Master Bryagas stood, his ancient frame straightening with dignity. Dr. Strange speaks truth, though perhaps not the truth he intends. He is not Jedi. He does not think like Jedi, and that is precisely why his presence troubles us. The Wookiees. Translator made his next words sound almost sad. You are a being of immense power and skill, sorcerer. But power without philosophy is dangerous. Skill without wisdom invites catastrophe. The Jedi Order has survived 10,000 years because we understand that individual judgment, no matter how well-intentioned, must be balanced by collective wisdom. Then help me understand your wisdom, Strange replied. Because from where I stand, your collective wisdom is failing. The Nihil are escalating. The Republic is fracturing. Your golden age is balanced on a knife's edge. And everyone can sense it, but no one will name it directly. Maybe what you need isn't more meditation and consensus. Maybe you need someone willing to make the hard calls, absorb the consequences, and do whatever's necessary to protect innocent lives. Even if those hard calls lead you toward darkness? Avar asked. Strange met her eyes. Master Chris, I've stared into the dark dimension for subjective eternities. I've bargained with Dormammu, an entity of pure cosmic evil, and walked away unchanged. I've wielded the Time Stone, power that could reshape reality itself, and used it only to save lives. If I was going to fall to darkness, I would have done so years ago. The fact that I haven't isn't luck or coincidence. It's discipline. The same discipline that's kept me human, despite seeing things that would shatter most minds. He took a breath, forcing calm into his voice. But if you're asking whether I'll always make choices the Jedi Council would approve of, no, I won't. I can't promise to follow your philosophy when it conflicts with my moral compass. What I can promise is that I'll always act to minimize suffering, protect the innocent, and oppose tyranny in all its forms. If that's not enough for your order, then we should part ways now before anyone else gets hurt. The council was silent. Strange could feel them deliberating through the Force, their consciousnesses touching in ways his mystical senses could barely perceive. It was beautiful and alien all at once, collective decision-making that transcended words, guided by an energy field that connected all living things. Finally, Avar spoke. The council has decided. You may remain aboard Starlight Beacon, continue your studies of the Force, and assist in the defense of Republic citizens when called upon. But, her expression hardened. You will not operate independently. You will not make strategic decisions without consultation. And you will submit to oversight from a designated Jedi Master who will monitor your connection to the Force and ensure you're not drifting toward methods incompatible with the light side. And who's the lucky master drawing that assignment? Strange asked dryly. Me, Elzer said, stepping forward with a slight smile. Partially because my own approach to the Force is considered unorthodox enough that I understand your perspective. Partially because I'm curious about what we might learn from each other. The Jedi Order has survived because we believe in certain fundamental truths. That the Force guides those who listen. That collective wisdom surpasses individual judgment. That attachment and passion lead to suffering. And the dark side. These aren't just philosophical positions. Dr. Strange, they're the foundation of everything we are. She met his eyes. And you challenge every single one of them simply by existing. By being someone who wields immense power through individual will. Who makes choices based on personal judgment. And who treats the Force like a resource to be understood, rather than a guide to be followed. You're afraid I'll prove your philosophy wrong, Strange realized. I'm afraid you'll prove it incomplete, Avar corrected. That everything the Jedi have built, over 10,000 years, is just one approach among many. And if that's true, if your way works equally well or better for certain situations, then what does that say about our claim to be the Force's primary servants? Strange considered his response carefully. Master Chris, where I come from, we have a saying, the map is not the territory. Your Jedi philosophy is a map, an incredibly detailed, time-tested map that's helped billions of people navigate the territory of the Force. But maps can be incomplete without being wrong. They can be accurate for certain terrain while missing features that matter in different contexts. He gestured at the viewport, at the stars beyond. I'm not trying to replace your map. I'm trying to add notes in the margins. New paths for unusual terrain. Alternative routes when the main road is blocked. That doesn't invalidate what the Jedi have built. It just acknowledges that the Force is vast enough to accommodate multiple approaches. Avar was quiet for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. You know what I hear when you talk like that? I hear someone who's spent too much time alone, making decisions in isolation, believing he has to carry every burden. Personally, she placed a hand on his shoulder. You're not alone anymore, Stephen. You're part of something larger now, whether you fully accept it or not. Let us help carry the weight. That's what the Order is for. Before Strange could respond, alarms shrieked through Starlight Beacon for what felt like the 100th time. But this was different. Not the urgent call of a raid or attack. This was the deep, resonant warning that indicated a Republic-wide emergency. Something catastrophic enough to trigger protocols, reserved for system-threatening disasters. Stellan's voice crackled through the station's comm system, tension evident despite his usual calm. All Jedi to the command center immediately. We're receiving reports from the IRM system, multiple hyperspace anomalies, massive energy signatures, and... He paused, and Strange heard genuine fear in the tactical master's voice, and a distress call claiming that something is tearing the planet's moon apart. From the inside, Strange and Avar ran. The command center was chaos when they arrived. Holographic displays showed the IRM system, a mid-rim world known for peaceful governance and thriving arts culture. But the moon of Irem, a barren rock used primarily for mining, was fragmenting. Massive chunks of its surface were being ejected into space, and the planet's oceans were already responding to the gravitational disruption with tidal waves that threatened coastal cities. What could do that? Elzer demanded, studying the data. A weapon? Some kind of mining accident? Neither. Strange's mystical senses had locked onto something in the holographic display, something that made his blood run cold. Look at the pattern of destruction. It's not radiating from a central point like an explosion would. It's following geometric lines. Perfect geometric lines. He traced his finger through the hologram, highlighting the fracture patterns. They formed a mandala, a mystical symbol he recognized from his studies, one associated with dimensional breaches and reality warping. That's not natural, he said. And it's not nihil technology either. That's mystical energy. Someone, or something, is using magic to tear that moon apart. Magic. Skier's skepticism was evident. You're the only sorcerer in this galaxy, Strange. Unless you're suggesting there are others. I'm suggesting that when I was pulled through the dimensional rift, when I arrived on Starlight Beacon, I might not have come alone. Strange's hands clenched. I felt something following me through the breach. Something patient. Something waiting. I thought I was paranoid. That the trauma of dimensional transit had left me sensing threats that didn't exist. But you were right. Avar finished, her expression horrified. Something did follow you. And now it's manifesting. Not just manifesting. Strange pointed at the geometric pattern again, announcing itself. This isn't a random attack. It's a message, directed at me. The holographic display shifted, showing new data from Irem's surface. Civilian casualties mounting. Evacuation efforts overwhelmed. And in orbit around the fragmenting moon. A presence that Republic sensors couldn't properly classify, an energy signature that existed, partially outside normal spacetime, flickering between dimensions like a flame in the wind. Master Briaga's aged voice carried across the command center. Then it appears, Dr. Strange, that your arrival has brought more than just new knowledge to our galaxy. It has brought new threats. The question is, are you prepared to face what you've inadvertently unleashed? Strange met the ancient Wookiee's eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders like a familiar burden. I've faced demons before. Master Briaga. Literal demons from dimensions where the laws of reality don't apply. If something followed me here, if it's threatening innocent lives because of my presence, then I'll do what I've always done. He turned to Avar. I'll stop it, whatever the cost. Not alone, Avar said firmly. We're partners now, remember? The Jedi and the Sorcerer facing threats together. Together, Elzer agreed. For the Republic, Stellan added. Even Skier nodded, his earlier hostility replaced by warrior's focus. For the innocent, Strange felt something shift in his chest. Not the Force, not magic, but something simpler and more powerful. Connection. For the first time since being ripped from his universe. Since losing contact with Wong and the other masters of the mystic arts. Since finding himself stranded in a galaxy that operated on rules he barely understood, he wasn't alone. He had allies, partners, people who would stand with him against the darkness, whatever form it took. Then we go to Irem, Strange said. We evacuate who we can, contain what we can't. And when we face whatever came through that dimensional rift with me, we show it that this galaxy, this Republic, this collection of beings who believe in hope and light, we don't break easily. The Jedi began coordinating their response. Ships launched from Starlight Beacon. Evacuation protocols activated. Republic forces mobilized across a dozen systems. And Stephen Strange stood at the viewport, watching the stars streak past as they jumped to hyperspace, preparing to face a threat he'd inadvertently brought to this galaxy. The Force flowed around him, through him, harmonizing with his magic in ways that still felt new and strange. But it felt right. Like two instruments finding a melody they were always meant to play together. Whatever waited on Irem, demon, dimensional entity, or something unique to the collision between his universe and this one, it would learn what the High Republic had known for 2 centuries. That hope, defended by those willing to sacrifice everything, was the most powerful force in any universe. Even the darkness that had followed him across dimensional barriers would learn that truth, or be destroyed by it. The battle for Irem's moon would become legend in the High Republic's chronicles. The day a sorcerer from beyond reality and the Jedi Order's finest stood together against a dimensional horror that had no name in any galactic language. They called it the Breachborn, an entity of pure mystical entropy that existed to unmake what Strange's magic had inadvertently touched when he tore through dimensional barriers. The fight lasted 3 days. Strange pushed his newfound harmony with the Force to its absolute limit, weaving spells that drew on both disciplines' strengths, while Avar Kriss coordinated a defense that turned the Jedi's collective connection into a shield around the planet below. Elzer Mann discovered new Force techniques by watching Strange work, adapting mystical principles into Jedi practice. Even Skier found grudging respect for the sorcerer who stood bleeding and exhausted, but unbroken, refusing to yield while innocent lives remained threatened. In the end, Strange sealed the Breachborn using a technique that shouldn't have been possible, a hybrid construct that combined the mirror dimension's isolating properties with the Force's ability to bind and contain. The entity was trapped between realities, neither destroyed nor free, held in a prison that existed outside normal space-time. It would remain there for centuries, a reminder that some threats required more than one discipline to defeat. But victory came with cost. Strange's connection to his home universe weakened further, the dimensional barriers thickening. As he attuned more deeply to the Force, he was becoming part of this galaxy whether he wished it or not, his magic transforming into something new with each passing day. The mystic arts and the Force, learning to speak as one voice through a being who belonged fully to neither tradition. Marchion Ro watched reports of the battle from the shadows of the Nihil's hidden base, studying footage of Strange's abilities with calculating interest. The Eye of the Nihil had seen enough. This sorcerer was too dangerous to ignore, too valuable to waste, and too isolated from his origins to have fully committed to the Jedi's cause. There would be opportunities, pressure points to exploit, ways to turn such power toward chaos rather than order. The game was only beginning. On Starlight Beacon, as reconstruction efforts began on Irem, and the Republic celebrated their narrow victory, Stephen Strange stood once more at the viewport, overlooking the Outer Rim's vast darkness. Master Avar Kriss joined him, her presence calm in the Force. "You're worried," she observed. "The Breachborn was a symptom, not the disease," Strange replied quietly. "Something is coming, Master Kriss. Something that makes dimensional horrors look like minor inconveniences. I can feel it building, like pressure before a storm. Your golden age, this entire era of peace and prosperity, it's going to be tested in ways no one is prepared for. Then we'll face it together," Avar said simply. "The Force and magic and everything in between. Whatever darkness approaches, it will find the High Republic ready." Strange wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that faith and hope would be enough against what he sensed gathering in the galaxy's shadows. But he'd seen too many civilizations fall, too many last stands fail, too many heroes break under impossible weight. Still, he'd also seen miracles, witnessed ordinary beings do extraordinary things, learned that sometimes the universe put you exactly where you needed to be, with exactly the allies you needed, at exactly the right moment. Maybe the Force had brought him here not as punishment or accident, but as preparation. A sorcerer learning to harmonize with an ancient energy field, creating something new for threats that required innovation rather than tradition. "You know what I think, Master Kriss?" Strange said, surprising himself with the hope in his own voice. I think your order has spent 10,000 years learning how to defend this galaxy. And I think the mystic arts have spent centuries learning how to fight threats from beyond reality. If we can truly merge those disciplines, if we can create something that combines your wisdom with my knowledge, then maybe, Avar finished, we'll be ready for whatever darkness is coming. They stood together at the viewport, sorcerer and Jedi, watching the stars burn in the endless night. Somewhere out there, Marchion Ro plotted. The Nihil regrouped. Dimensional barriers weakened. And the future remained unwritten, balanced between hope and catastrophe. But for now, in this moment, aboard a station called Starlight Beacon that represented everything the High Republic aspired to be. Two beings from impossibly different traditions had found common ground. The Force and magic, learning the same language. Light and knowledge, defending the same ideal. And when the darkness finally came, and both knew it would, they would face it not as Jedi or sorcerer, but as something unprecedented in either galaxy's history. Partners, allies, friends, two disciplines becoming one, just as the Force had always intended.